another way to think about this is to pretend like you already have the job. You're on the same side of the table as the interviewer, and you're just trying to help them solve their problems. You're brainstorming with them. You're trying to figure out if you're the right candidate and the right person to help and how you might be able to help them with their different issues. So, and sometimes what happens when you take this mindset, first of all, you'll be less nervous, right? Secondly, you'll be naturally focused on their number one question, which is, how can you help me? That's their number one question. Every single person you meet with is looking to get the answer to how can you help me? And for each person you meet, the answer might be a little bit different, even if it's in the same company, and they're all interviewing you for the same job. Each person is thinking, how can this person help me? In fact, they only have 3 questions. You may think they're asking you all these different types of questions. They all fall into one of these 3 buckets. How can you help me? Why do you want to work here? And will you fit in? So why do you want to work here? Meaning, are you going to stick around or are you going to leave in 6 months? And will you fit in? So no matter what you think they're asking you, it's really one of these 3. So keep this in mind when you prepare it, okay? And I'll get to your question in a second. The last thing I want to mention is sometimes when you take this mindset, you're focusing on their problems and issues and trying to see how you can help them. Sometimes you realize you're not the right fit. Like they want X and you're Y. So what do? You say, listen, it looks like you want Y, I'm X. I know someone who can help you. I'll refer them to you. And by the way, who should I be talking to? Now you know what I can do. It becomes like a networking meeting, right? So even when you take this mindset, even if it's not the right fit, it's like you bring them into your network. We'll talk more about that. That's the attitude you want to take here, okay? Stories that's what we remember. Giving examples makes things memorable. So you don't have to have 15 different stories. You can come up with 2 or 3 stories. That's plenty. And the reason I say not 15 is because I want you to practice these stories. I want you to get really good at telling these stories. And if you have a lot of stories, you're not going to be able to practice them all. And I've seen it with clients. Like they have too many stories. They just don't have the time. And every story sounds sort of superficial. It's not that interesting. And you don't need more than 3. It's enough to show that you're not a one-trick pony. So they're not going to say, oh, she told you that story. She told me the same story. Nobody says that, right? It just doesn't happen because I've been doing this a long time. If you have 3 different stories, it's enough to vary it among all the people you're meeting with, okay? And that way you can really find the time to practice these and get really good at these stories. Make sure these stories are relevant. Don't tell them a story that has nothing to do with what they want you to do, okay? You want to practice them. You want to introduce them in your pitch, as we talked about. And you try to, now this is super important. We're going to get into this. You want to try to use these stories to answer every question you get, okay? So the way, and we'll get to that more specifically in a moment, okay? Now, the way you want to tell the story, I'm going to give you a format, okay? The format, now there are lots of ways to tell success story formats. I like PAR because it's super simple because these 3 elements are in every good story that you've ever seen in a movie, you've ever read in a book. The problem you faced, the action you took, and the result, PAR, okay? Problem, action, result. So when you're telling your story, you want to make sure you're bringing out these 3 elements. And just like any great story you saw in a movie or you read in a book, you want to make that story, that example, dramatic. Make it engaging, make it important, make it emotional. Like grab their attention, wake them up, make their day more interesting because they met you in a good way, not in a bad way, right? So that's what you want to go for. So we're going to go through a couple examples in a second, okay? But I'm just giving you the overview here. Now, common mistakes when people give these examples, these stories, is, for example, one thing is they get into too much detail, becomes too long, too boring, okay? Or it's just like the pitch, right? Too much jargon, they're not following, they don't understand the acronyms, they're getting lost. You don't want that either, right? There's something called the curse of knowledge. You can Google it. It's like a whole thing where it's a human tendency to assume people know what you know. You got to be careful not to assume that and make sure you're talking in a way that's going to resonate with your audience. So you always have to, like just any good salesperson, you need to start with your audience and make sure your stories, your pitch, what you're telling them is going to resonate with your audience, okay? That's how you overcome the curse of knowledge. Too little detail just makes your story not interesting, not memorable, Okay. If you use we too much, this is a common issue with people who try to give these examples. They say, well, we did this, and then we did that, and then we did this other thing, and we. We is good up to a point. Like, you want to show you can work with other people, but you got to bring in I. They're not hiring we, they're hiring you. So they got to see what you did. So you got to find a way, even if you did it as part of a team, you got to say, I worked with my colleagues. Say it that way, I, so they could see what you did. Yeah?
I get feedback from say you keep on telling what you can do and what you did in the I form, obviously, and they don't like that. Is it just person to person? I mean,
I don't know where you're getting this feedback. What I can tell you is I'm sorry you're getting this. I can just tell you that we've got to have a bigger conversation. I'm sure there's more to it than what you're just saying that I just can't get in this short time frame. But you've got to say what you did. Now, if you're taking credit for things that seem unrealistic, that's where they may be getting pushback. Like, you're saying, I rebuilt this company. Yeah, but you're like just this lowly analyst, and isn't the CEO the one who's supposed to say that? Then they might be saying, hey, there's a problem there, right? So that's why you and I would need to talk more. I don't know what's going on here, but you got to say what you did. They want to hire, they want to know. They have to know, or they're not going to hire you. If you just say we, they don't get what you did. Well, did you have a tiny role in that or a big role? They don't know. Okay. Are people with me on this? Okay. So, okay. Now, another issue, okay? Forget to tie the problem and the result to the bottom line. So this is really important. Like, when you're telling your story, you want to remember, you want to make it dramatic. You want to make it engaging. You want to make it important. You want to show what you did was really important, okay? So the best way to do that is to tie it to, like, the bottom line. If it's revenue, talk about the revenue that was at stake, or the opportunity to make more revenue that you had a key role in, or something like that. Lastly, people sometimes they'll say, here was the problem. You give a really great description of the big issue, and then you say, so then anyway, I did some stuff, and the result was it was great. You didn't talk about the action. You didn't take them on your journey. They want to understand what you did. This is your opportunity to show them how you operate in an organization. So make sure you don't give too little attention to the action and problem, action, result. Okay, just to give you an example. So I had a client who, she was a relationship manager, a customer relationship manager, and one of her stories was, so she started to tell me the story. She said, Rob, I have an example. I have a story. Tell me what you think. So she said, well, I was a relationship manager at my most recent company, and I found out this client was thinking of leaving us and going to a competitor. So I found out why they were leaving us and why they were thinking of leaving us. And I was able to come up with a proposal with my team, and we presented the proposal to them, and we ultimately got them to stay. That was her story, right? It's like, it's okay, not bad, but it could be way, way better, right? Way more interesting. I don't know how much that's going to it's sort of interesting, but it's not enough to really be memorable. So when we got done with this story, it was more like the following. So she started off again. She said, here, I'll give you an example of how I help. Because the question might have been like, give me an example of how you've worked with clients. She said, sure, here's my example. So one client, I was working with this client who'd been with us since the start of the company, so for 8 years. And I managed key accounts. So I was managing this key account. They were giving us a quarter of our revenue. And because I had so many great relationships with people all over this company, the account company, I heard through the grapevine that they were talking to a competitor and they were thinking of leaving. And as soon as I heard this, I was like really alarmed because they were giving us a quarter of our revenue still. And if they left, it would have been devastating to our company. The company at that time was trying to get bought, and no investor in that scenario would have wanted to look at us. So it was so important that we did whatever we could to keep this client. That was the problem. Do you see how much better the problem is when you describe it that way? Doesn't it sound way more important than just saying, oh, this big account was thinking of leaving? That's what you need to go for. You're tying it to the bottom line. You with me so far? Okay. Now she went into the action. So then she said, all right, so there was this big problem. So now you're, by the way, in the problem, you're showing how important your role is too. Like she's demonstrating to the interviewer like she had a really important role, an important job. It was a big deal. They entrusted her with a lot of responsibility. So then she said, all right, so here's what I did. So the way I approached this challenging issue of keeping this client was I said, I have to learn, there are 3 things I did. First, I had to figure out exactly why they were thinking of leaving. What was the issue? What was the competitor offering that we couldn't offer? The second thing I would have had to do was, once I had understood this, was to buy time to come up with a counter proposal. Leverage my relationships to buy time. And the third thing I would have to do was develop a presentation with my team that would be persuasive enough to get them to stay. So those are the 3 ways I thought about solving this problem. And so the first thing, by the way, so you see what I just did? She introduced her strategy for addressing the challenge. This is part of the action, right? Problem, action, result. She introduced it. That's what you want to do. Show how your brain works. Don't just say, first I did this, then I did this, then I did that, then I did that. Say, here's how I approach the problem, right? Talk about how you think. That's what you're going to be bringing to them. Okay. So she said, here are the 3 things I was thinking about. So in terms of understanding the problem, understanding the issue they were having with us and what the competitor was offering, I really leveraged my network to gain that understanding. And I found out that the competitor was offering something we just didn't have yet. They were offering something we couldn't provide, and the things we were providing, they were giving a discount on versus what we were charging. So that was a big issue for us. So what I did was I was able to, again, through my network, I had a lot of connections with the C-level. I contacted them. I said, I know you're talking to a competitor. I have some thoughts for you that I think you really want to hear. Give me a week, and I think I want to share with you some ideas that I think will be in your interest to hear. And because I had this great relationship with the C-level executives, they agreed. So you see how she's doing this? Like she's bringing in I have C-level relationships. Like it's interesting, right? So I got together with my team. We came up with this great proposal that talked about what we could deliver for them that no other competitor could deliver, our unique competitive advantage. We came up with a fantastic presentation. I went with my team to present, and a couple of the C-level executives I worked for. We went there as a group. We presented, and it was persuasive. The result was not only did they change their mind and decide to stay with us, but they ultimately gave us more business. Don't you see how that's a better story? You agree with me? Okay. So who wants to take a shot at this?